it's only a couple pennies, I guess it doesn't matter. So I'm sure many of you have experienced what just happened to me. Maybe you were reaching into your pant pocket hoping to get some change, and you dropped a couple pennies and you thought to yourself, it's not worth the hassle of me having to pick it up. Or maybe you were cleaning your room one day, you pull out the vacuum and you vacuumed up some pennies and you think to yourself, well, shit, is it worth it for me to open up the vacuum and have to fish out 3 cents? No. So you don't, right? Well, I think it's time to retire the penny. The benefits of keeping the penny are vastly outweighed and diminished by the detrimental effects of its existence. So keeping the penny's production and circulation should be halted because of the way it harms government finances, businesses, and more importantly, the consumer, which is you, me, and all of us. In addition, in modern society, we are beginning to drift away from using physical forms of tender to using credit card or debit cards. Sometimes nowadays I've seen people use their phones to pay for their purchases, and a lot of forms of e-currency are starting to rise as well. So today I'm going to be talking to you guys about why I think the penny is worthless now, and the way it negatively affects government businesses, and all of us. And also I'll be touching base on some of the counter arguments against abolishing the penny. So first off, I think the penny is worthless. When discussing the penny, I think it's important to talk about the cost of making the penny. In 2016, the U.S. Treasury did a research saying that it cost 1.5 cents to make the penny, which is ultimately worth more to make the penny than the penny is actually worth. And the price to make a penny is actually gradually rising. In 2017, it rose up to 1.82 cents. So it just doesn't make any sense to me to have to keep it in circulation if it's ultimately just a net loss for the government. The lack of profit may be worth it if pennies were expected to be reused, or if the pennies were expected to be reused, much like the quarter. If I drop a quarter on the ground, I'm gonna have to think more about if I want to pick it up, because if that quarter, if I drop the quarter, then I have to risk not having a quarter the next time I have to buy a Scantron for my next final exam. Or I could save up 3 more quarters and have $1 to buy a granola bar so I could be better prepared for the speech. But pennies are virtually worthless, and most vending machines won't even take pennies anyways. Actually, I don't think any vending machines take pennies nowadays. Which brings me to my second point. They are virtually unavoidable. When you have to pay in cash at a store and the amount doesn't end in a multiple of 5 cents, we have to make the choice of either finding more change in our pocket or purse, or we have to risk getting more change back in return, which is more of a hassle for us, which I believe the irony is self-evident. And as a cashier, I know the pain of having to stand there waiting for the customer to fumble to get more change in their pant pocket or purse. And ultimately, I just think it's not worth my time. Studies showed that in cash transactions, when you had to find more change, it adds 2 extra seconds to our transaction. And 2 seconds doesn't really seem like much, but when the average consumer makes about 23 cash transactions per month, it rounds up to about 48 million hours wasted on cash transactions, which is a lot of time when you really think about it. And ultimately, as a consumer, it's not doing us any favors either. When we have to pay in cash, and if we decide to pay in all pennies, you're gonna most likely get batted an ugly eye, or even just a flat out refusal. Like no cashier is gonna wanna have to deal with counting out all the pennies that you pulled out, having to pay for your purchase. Another study showed by the Citizens to Retire the U.S. Penny did a study in Chipotle where instead of asking for the exact amount, they rounded up to the nearest 5 cents. And when that happened, it actually got some negative feedback because most people didn't want to pay the extra fee. But instead of stopping the experiment altogether, they actually rounded down to the nearest 5 cents, and that cost less than having to wait out the extra 2 seconds for the customer to find extra change, or having the cashier to count out the exact change back. So, in conclusion, I think it's time to retire the penny. And although the penny honors Lincoln, and we Americans have grown emotionally attached to the penny, they are virtually worthless now, and we can't buy anything with them. Neighboring countries such as Canada have successfully removed the penny in circulation, and I believe it's time for us to follow in their footsteps. Thank you.
When it's 9:45, they mean I ain't going that far.
All right, I kind of like the action as a detention device. That was effective. I also like the transition that you have to the topic. Be careful about the oh shit. I think that's probably one of those things that we cross a line occasionally, and we don't want to become too coarse. And remember, we do want a kind of appropriate context here. But it's not that big a deal. Just something that you probably want to watch out for in other contexts. Your goal is clearly stated. I think and your position is clear. It feels like the preview shows up 2 or 3 times at the beginning of the speech. You say it at one point, then you come back, and then it turns out that the preview that you gave me is actually the second point in the speech, and that there's something else that you're going to be talking about before that, and then when you get to it, it kind of repeats on itself. So I think that that's a little bit awkward. That's probably just something that you could work on with practice and smooth that out. I think that you have good information about the cost of the penny, and I think there's some information that's missing about why we continue to use the penny, how many pennies are in circulation, whether or not people actually utilize them on a regular basis. The closest you come to talking about that sort of thing is the notion that they're all hypothetical examples of having to look for change, or having, not having any vending machines that use pennies. I think that those are good examples, but there's probably some information about how the pennies don't get circulated, how many we produce each year, how many have to be replaced each year, why they think they have to be replaced. I feel like there's just a little bit of background information that's missing here. But the idea, I think, is explained well, and then you have some good visualizations of problems that people run into with having to deal with the penny. The calculation about the 48 million hours that you're talking about, or whatever, was it 48 million hours?
Yeah.
It gets wasted? Yeah. I think that needs to be explained a little bit more, because I'm going, okay, well, I'm doing math in my head in front of people, and I can't do that. It's 2 seconds per transaction, and the average person does 23 transactions a month, and so you count the number of people, you count the number of transactions, count the number of seconds for each of those. I guess that's probably how you come up with the 48 million. I'm going, yeah, if we were calculating it as a total amount of hours, that sounds pretty significant. But if you're calculating it on an individual basis, you know, that's less than a minute a month for each person, and that doesn't seem like it's all that significant. I'm not sure that that gets you quite as much as you want. I think that the notion that there's inconvenience or that you're distracting people. I like the survey that says, oh my gosh, when we rounded up, people hated it, but when they rounded down, nobody had a problem with it. That's probably what we ought to do, is round down. As a matter of fact, let's get rid of the quarter too, and let's just round down to $1, and then I'll save myself a quarter every time I buy a soda, you know. But I like the idea that you're expressing there, and I think that you've got some good information in the presentation. Presentation issues, I think you'll probably be aware of what some of them are. You have to keep looking. I know you've got the notes over there on the podium so you can see some of the information. And whenever you get stuck there, your eyes drift over there and you kind of disengage from us. You also look down quite a bit too, because you're thinking out loud, trying to remember what you're saying. So this is all practice sort of thing. And that's going to be a little bit more natural. We do have the arms being crossed in a couple of spots. That looked a little bit awkward. But your voice, I think, is pretty effective, and the pacing is good. So most of the issues on presentation, I think, are just rehearsal issues. And you know, when you fall behind and you're trying to catch up, and you're just going, let me just get it done. You know, you don't get as much of that practice as you want, and you know that's going to make a difference sometimes. All right, thank you.